She met Hunter through a dating app, a charming stranger who seemed perfect at first. Over the course of a month, they went on 4 dates, each one pulling her deeper into what felt like the start of something real. But beneath the surface, something wasn't right. Their first date was a brief coffee meeting, nothing more than a screening process to ensure he seemed normal. Their second date was at a nearby bar, where they shared drinks and conversation, both catching a pleasant buzz. It wasn't until the third date, a dinner, that she began to question things. Something about his personality felt slightly off. She couldn't quite pinpoint it, but certain mannerisms made her uneasy. The date ended with a single kiss, the first and only one between them. She convinced herself that because she had let it happen, things must have gone well. A couple of weeks later, they went on their 4th and final date. They met for drinks again, but this time, she approached it with a more skeptical mindset. As the night progressed, she noticed little quirks in his behavior that struck her as unusual. His mannerisms, his way of speaking, something about him felt socially off, even unsettling. He drank more than before, far too much, and became increasingly touchy, attempting to kiss her multiple times. She was uncomfortable with public displays of affection, especially in a crowded bar. Each time, she politely turned him down. Within minutes, she mentioned she was tired, hoping to end the evening. He paid the check, they grabbed their coats, and left. As they walked toward their cars, Hunter stopped her abruptly and bluntly asked if they could go home together. She declined, citing exhaustion and work the next morning, though it was a lie. He persisted, offering to drive her to work, which she found absurd, regardless of his level of inebriation. She also wasn't comfortable with the idea of him driving under the influence. At that moment, she decided she wouldn't see him again. She walked to her car, parked across the street, and drove off cautiously. She had only had a couple of drinks, but she remained vigilant about her surroundings. That vigilance led her to notice a car following her, making the same turns she did. At a stoplight, she realized it looked just like Hunter's car. Texting him, she asked, "Are you following me?" He responded quickly with, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home, okay?" She called him, but he refused to pick up. The situation felt wrong, deeply unsettling. She pulled over and sent a message telling him to stop. Watching from her rearview mirror, she saw his car slow in the middle of the road. After a brief pause, presumably to read her message, he drove off without another word. That night, while lying in bed, she received another text from him. "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time we should do something more low-key, like dinner at my place." She didn't respond. The following morning, he texted again. "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" When she didn't answer right away, he sent a single question mark, prompting her to reply before things escalated further. She responded with a polite but firm message, telling him she had enjoyed getting to know him, but didn't feel their personalities clicked. She also mentioned she wanted to focus on herself, hoping he would understand. Instead, his tone shifted to anger. His messages turned accusatory, the worst being, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates just to tell me that? How about you pay me back half of everything I bought for you?" More messages followed, containing personal information she would rather not repeat. Feeling threatened, she blocked his number, believing that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Soon her phone was flooded with no-caller ID calls, relentless and unending. She ignored them all until finally they stopped. The next day, when she arrived home from work, alone, she found a bouquet of flowers waiting on the front stoop. Tucked inside was a card, an apology from Hunter, asking for a second chance. That was when she realized something chilling. He knew where she lived. The gesture wasn't sweet or romantic. It was invasive and terrifying. She sent him one final message, warning him never to contact her again or come to her house, or she would file for a restraining order. Then, she blocked his number for good. She hoped that would be the end of it. She was wrong. Not long after, she was home alone for the night. Her parents' house was large, and her bedroom, a loft, was the highest point in the home. She awoke suddenly in the middle of the night, unsure of what had roused her. She lay still, listening. Then she heard it, a noise from downstairs. Straining to hear, she soon recognized the unmistakable sound of a door opening somewhere in the house. Nobody else was supposed to be home. Even in her groggy state, a single thought crystallized in her mind: an intruder. She slid out of bed and crawled onto the floor, slipping underneath it before dialing 911. With her other hand, she texted her family, asking if anyone was home. She heard distant noises from another part of the house. Then her bedroom door opened. Footsteps ascended the carpeted stairs. She held her breath, heart pounding as silence filled the room. The entire floor was carpeted, making it impossible to track movement. Then, the sound of drawers opening reached her ears. Someone was rummaging through her belongings. She pressed her hand to her mouth, suppressing her breathing. A low, frustrated voice cursed under its breath. The familiarity of the voice sent a chill down her spine. Hunter. He was in her room. She remained motionless as he continued rifling through her things. Then she felt the weight shift on her bed. Through the fabric of the bed skirt, she could make out the outline of two shoes in the darkness. He was sitting there, just sitting. Minutes passed. Her chest ached from holding her breath. Then at last, he stood. "Fucking bitch," he muttered before closing the drawers and heading back down the stairs. She heard the front door shut, followed by footsteps fading into the distance. Only then did she whisper into her phone, still connected to the 911 operator. She remained under the bed for another 10 minutes until she saw flashing blue and red lights outside. A police officer knocked at the front door. She let them in, recounting everything in detail. As they searched the house, a second officer, a woman, arrived to assist. It turned out every window had been unlocked. The dining room window, large enough for someone to crawl through, seemed the likely entry point. Bushes obstructed the view from outside, making the break-in easy to miss. She gave her statement and was issued a report number before the officers left. When her parents returned home the next day, they already knew what had happened through her frantic messages and phone calls. What had begun as a series of uncomfortable dates had spiraled into something truly terrifying. Hunter wasn't just a bad match, he was dangerous. And she had no doubt that if she hadn't woken up that night, the outcome could have been much worse. The road stretched empty beneath the glow of distant streetlights, their flickering bulbs casting uneven shadows along the cracked pavement. Elena Carter, wrapped in a beige trench coat over a simple navy dress, walked briskly toward her car, parked further down the quiet street. Her heels clicked against the concrete, the sound unnervingly sharp in the silence. She had spent the evening with Daniel, her boyfriend of 6 months, and now all she wanted was to get home and sleep. But as she reached for her keys, a strange sensation prickled at the back of her neck, like someone was watching her. Elena hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cold metal of her keys. The street was deserted, the nearest traffic light blinking red in an endless loop, yet the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave her. She turned her head slightly, scanning the sidewalk and the alleyways between the buildings. Nothing. Just the stillness of the night. Forcing a breath, she unlocked her car and pulled open the door. But just as she slid into the driver's seat, a movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. A figure, standing too far to make out the face, lingered beneath the broken glow of a street lamp. Elena's pulse quickened as she gripped the edge of the car door, her eyes locked on the figure. He didn't move, didn't take a step closer, just stood there, half shrouded in darkness. Maybe it was just a stranger passing through, someone waiting for a ride. But why was he staring? Swallowing down the rising unease, she forced herself to look away, slipping into the driver's seat and shutting the door with a sharp click. The moment she turned the key in the ignition, her hands trembled slightly on the wheel. She wasn't usually this paranoid, but something about this felt wrong. Elena exhaled, shaking off the tension as the engine rumbled to life. She adjusted the rearview mirror out of habit, but when she glanced into it, her breath hitched. The figure was still there, but now he was closer. No longer standing beneath the broken street lamp, he had moved just beyond the edge of the sidewalk, his features still obscured by the dim light. A chill crawled up her spine. It wasn't Daniel. She knew his build, the way he moved. This man was different, taller, leaner, and he wasn't walking past, he was watching her. Her instincts screamed at her to leave. Without another glance, she shifted into drive and pulled away from the curb, her heart hammering. The streetlights blurred past as she drove, her focus flicking between the road ahead and the mirror. The man didn't follow, not on foot at least. But as she neared the next intersection, headlights flared in the distance. A dark-colored car, idling at the stop sign. The moment she approached, it made a slow, deliberate turn onto the same road. Elena's fingers tightened around the wheel. Coincidence, it had to be, yet a gnawing sense of dread settled in her stomach. Elena kept her eyes on the road, but her attention remained fixed on the headlights trailing behind her. The car didn't speed up, didn't try to pass. It just stayed there, matching her pace. She swallowed hard, gripping the wheel as she made a right turn onto a quieter street, hoping the other driver would continue straight. But as she glanced in the mirror, her stomach twisted. The car followed. The realization sent a jolt of fear through her. This wasn't random. Someone was following her. Her mind raced. Was it the man from the sidewalk? Was she overreacting? She pressed her foot down slightly, picking up speed, but the car behind her did the same. Her breath grew unsteady. She reached for her phone in the passenger seat, fumbling to unlock it while keeping one hand on the wheel. Just as she started to dial, the car's headlights suddenly flared brighter, speeding up, closing the distance between them. A sharp gasp caught in her throat. Whoever was behind her wasn't just following anymore. They were coming for her. Elena's pulse pounded as she tightened her grip on the wheel. She couldn't go home, not if someone was chasing her. Instead, she veered onto a larger road, hoping to find other cars, some sign of life. But the street was empty, stretching out into darkness, and the vehicle behind her remained relentless. Her breaths came fast, her fingers trembling as she tried to think. Should she call the police? Drive to a gas station? Her gaze flicked to the mirror again, and that's when she saw it. The driver's silhouette, faintly illuminated by the dashboard glow. A face was eerily familiar, yet entirely wrong. Her stomach dropped. It looked like Daniel. But it wasn't him. The shape of the jaw, the slight difference in the way he held himself, it was off, just enough to make her skin crawl. A terrible realization clawed its way into her mind. Daniel had once mentioned having a brother, but he never spoke about him in detail. A twin. The memory came rushing back, fragmented and uneasy. She had laughed it off back then, never pressing for more. Now, staring at the man in the car behind her, she wished she had. Elena's breath came in shallow gasps as she forced herself to think. If Daniel had a twin, why had he never introduced them? Why had he avoided talking about him? And more importantly, why was his brother following her now? Panic clawed at her chest, but she couldn't let it take over. She needed to lose him. Without hesitating, she yanked the wheel sharply to the right, turning onto a dimly lit side street. Her tires screeched against the pavement, and for a fleeting second, she thought she had a chance to escape. But then, headlights. The same car rounded the corner behind her, moving faster now, closing the distance. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. He wasn't giving up. She pressed the gas pedal harder, scanning the road ahead for options. There was an intersection up ahead, but no traffic, no help. She could keep driving, hope for a way out, or stop and confront him. Neither choice felt safe. And then, as if sensing her hesitation, the car behind her suddenly surged forward, its engine roaring in the quiet night. He was done waiting. He was coming for her. Elena's hands were slick against the steering wheel as she pushed the car faster, her eyes darting between the road and the relentless headlights in her mirror. The quiet street stretched on endlessly, offering no turns, no escape. Her mind raced. If she didn't act now, he would catch up. Her pulse hammered as she spotted something ahead, a narrow dirt path veering off the main road. Without thinking, she jerked the wheel and swerved onto it, her tires kicking up dust as she plunged into the darkness. The moment she hit the uneven path, her car jolted violently, the headlights bouncing wildly over the trees that loomed on either side. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to keep control. For a second, she dared to hope. Maybe he wouldn't follow her onto the rough terrain. But then, the roar of an engine shattered that hope. A pair of headlights burst onto the path behind her, gaining ground with terrifying speed. He wasn't just following anymore. He was hunting her. Elena's chest tightened as she gripped the wheel, the narrow dirt path winding deeper into the darkness. The branches of overgrown trees clawed at the sides of her car, but she couldn't slow down. She stole a quick glance at the mirror. The other car was closing in. The road ahead dipped sharply, leading into what looked like an open field. If she could make it there, maybe she could lose him. But before she could act, the car behind her lunged forward, its bumper nearly grazing hers. A scream caught in her throat as she fought to stay on the road. He wasn't just chasing her anymore. He was trying to run her off the path. Another sharp jolt sent her car skidding sideways, tires slipping over loose gravel. She yanked the wheel, struggling to regain control, but it was too late. Her car lurched violently off the road, crashing into the field with a sickening crunch. The engine sputtered, smoke curling from the hood. Dazed, her vision swimming, Elena tried to move, but before she could even reach for the door handle, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps approached from behind. The driver's side door wrenched open, and cold air rushed in. Elena blinked up at the figure silhouetted against the night. The same face she had mistaken for Daniel's, but now up close, she saw the unsettling differences. His expression was unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on her. "You weren't supposed to love him," he murmured, his voice eerily calm. A flash of silver caught the moonlight, a knife. Panic surged through Elena, but before she could react, another pair of headlights appeared in the distance, speeding toward them. The roar of an engine cut through the night. A new car skidded to a stop, and a familiar voice shouted her name. "Elena!" "Daniel." In an instant, her pursuer spun around, but he was too late. Daniel tackled him to the ground, the knife slipping from his grasp. The two brothers struggled in the dirt, fists colliding in the dim light. Daniel fought with a desperation Elena had never seen before, his rage clear in every movement. "Stay away from her," he snarled, landing a final blow that sent his twin collapsing onto the ground, unmoving. Elena gasped for breath, her body trembling as Daniel rushed to her side. He cupped her face gently, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. Tears welled in her eyes, but she managed a weak nod. The sound of approaching sirens filled the night, flashing red and blue lights illuminating the field. Help had arrived. It was over. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I should have told you about him. I never thought he would." His voice broke with emotion. Elena clung to him, burying her face against his shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered back. "You saved me." And as the police secured the scene, as the nightmare finally came to an end, Elena knew one thing for certain. She was safe.